This is a discussion of Mrs. Williams, and we're going to do a case study about Mrs. Williams for right now. I'm going to quickly review some of the key points of the case study, and then we'll do a small discussion about some of the issues that are raised in terms of health law, privacy, abuse reporting, and so forth. I also have an opportunity to encourage you to put some of your own thoughts on the discussion board. So I've put it in New Brunswick. I don't think any of us are actually from New Brunswick, but it's an opportunity to place Ms. Mary Williams somewhere besides Ontario. So Ms. Mary Williams is an 82-year-old widow, and she's lived in rural New Brunswick with 2 children of her own. She has a son, Michael, who's 50 and lives in Fredericton, and he is a pipe fitter with a history of drinking. Michael, however, is the one who takes his mothers to appointments, and he visits fairly regularly. The daughter, Susan, she's 48. She lives in Calgary. She is an accountant and very successful in her own life. The son and daughter have never really gotten along very well, but Mary's managing fairly well. The house is a bit out of town. She takes some medicine, and she has to be careful of her blood sugar. She has occasionally had a urinary tract infection, which has been fairly easily treated in past. February in rural New Brunswick is cold and slushy, and she falls and slips. And she's found by a local friend who calls 911. She is admitted for a broken hip. Upon admission, she's quite disoriented, and she wasn't able to really understand what was happening or where she was. When they asked at the hospital if there was somebody that they could call, Mary said essentially that she was fine, she didn't need anybody. The hospital admissions clerk had a look in Mary's handbag and found Michael's information, as Mary was quite out of it. So she calls Michael, and he comes in quite promptly. When Mary sees Michael, she's very upset, and she's upset before that when she even finds out that Michael has even been called. The doctor has a conversation with Michael, and he asks him for medical consent to treat Mary. So Michael gives it to her, and Mary is taken to surgery. She needs to have her hip fixed. Michael, understandably, calls his sister Susan, and she starts arranging a flight booking to come, and she says to Michael, "Don't do anything until I get there." In the meantime, however, the hospital staff are asking Michael if he has a power of attorney, in this case for personal care decisions, as well as for financial decisions, and Michael says yes. The surgery is successful, but the doctor is worried about Mary's mental capacity, and he does an MMSE, a mini mental status exam, and she gets about a 13 or 14 on it, quite a low score, and he feels that she has cognitive impairment. Michael calls up his high school buddy George. George was a lawyer, and George comes and attends Mary and Michael both in the hospital room and brings power of attorney documents to sign. He goes through the information and asks if Mary understands. She nods yes and says that she doesn't need him to talk to her like she's an idiot, that she remembers George from when he was in diapers. So George, the lawyer, executes the document. But throughout, Mary keeps looking over at Michael quite worriedly. Susan shows up the next day and demands to see her mother. And she starts telling the hospital staff that she's going to arrange things before her useless brother makes his usual mess of things. The staff inform her that Michael has power of attorney for both medical and financial decisions. The doctor comes back 3 days later, and based on his discussion, decides that Mary is incapable of making her own decisions. So, as you can imagine, at this point, everything is a mess. The doctor is writing up a report declaring in his opinion that Mary is incapable of understanding or appreciating both medical and financial decisions. And then Michael goes off to the bank, and he starts moving some money around. There are bills to pay and decisions to make. In our next video, we'll give a discussion of some of the issues that are raised in health law.